Alright, young. Continuing on with Unit 4, Lesson 6 about the Northern colonies and Northern society. It says, in the 1700s, a new feeling spread through the American colonies. This feeling was called nationalism, or loyalty to one's country. Many colonists felt more loyal to the colonies themselves than to Britain. They felt closer to settlers of other colonies than to the British. Colonists started calling themselves Americans. Each year, the colonies became less like Britain. Many immigrants came from other European countries. They brought with them new religions. Lutherans, Baptists, Presbyterians, and other Protestant churches sprang up in the colonies. Catholics and Jews had their places of worship. The Quakers became a large and important group in the colonies. Different religious groups increased religious toleration, meaning open-mindedness, accepting of others. A movement called the Great Awakening started. This movement swept the colonies in the 1740s. It led people to demand a greater voice in running their churches. People spoke more about human rights. Some began to tolerate and accept different ideas. So next up is self-government again. Other differences divided the colonies from the British. Colonists were used to making their own decisions. They ran their towns and villages. They elected local leaders. Most colonies had elected assemblies, as we talked about previously with both the Mayflower Compact and the House of Burgesses. These assemblies increased their power over time. At first, laws were made by the colonial governors. The assemblies only approved laws. Later, assemblies won the power to pass their own laws. Colonists did not want the British government to tell them what to do. Growing trade. Colonists also did not want to obey British trade laws. These laws forced them to trade only with Britain. The colonists thought this was unfair. So by the 1700s, colonial merchants traded with many parts of the world. Ships from New England sold fish and lumber in the West Indies and returned with sugar and molasses. Often, merchants bought molasses, which was thick syrup, on French and Dutch islands. This was illegal, meaning against the law, but it was cheaper there than on the British islands. The trade routes were called the triangular trade. These routes formed a triangle between Europe, the Americas, and Africa. They exchanged or traded rum, clothing, and guns in exchange for slaves. The slaves were taken to the West Indies and the southern colonies. Colonists also traded with each other. Ships sailed up and down the Atlantic coast. New England merchants traded with southern plantations. This trade changed the colonies. They were no longer completely tied to Britain. Differences widened between 1660 and 1760. Britain's 13 colonies changed a great deal. Population, or the amount of people, increased from about 70,000 to over 1.5 million. By 1750, most colonists had been born in North America, meaning most people had moved there and then had children, and their children were born in America rather than people from England coming to America. It soon put the colonies on the road to independence. Question 1. Why did the colonists think of themselves as Americans? The colonists thought of themselves as Americans because many colonists felt more blank to the colonies than to this country. The colonists were used to making their own blank. They elected local blank and blank. Lastly, the colonists did not obey British laws. They traded with blank parts of the blank. They also blank with each other. So at this point, for question number 1, you're going to want to take a look at both this first section, a little bit of self-government, and then also in this growing trade section. For question number 2, it says, what happened to the population or the amount of people in the colonies between 1660 and 1760. It's talking about uh, what the population was and what it increased or grew to. So I would go over here where it talks about population as a buzzword, and I find my answer. I hope this helps.